Welcome again to American Zarathustra. I have with me my good friend Hapa Perspective. Today we're going to do a kind of a freestyle conversation about his concept, Ameriphobia. He and I were speaking privately on Telegram a while ago. He's very strong gun advocate. There's a lot to do with protection, and there's just a big topic to unfold. So I'm just pretty much going to hand the mic to Hapa and see what is this Ameriphobia concept you're talking about?
Well, first of all, I don't, I know I talk about the gun rights issue a lot, and it's a dangerous thing for me to mix with other topics. But yeah, I'm not alone. Black Pilled mentions it a lot, and I think some people probably look at me and think, God, this guy harps on this issue so much. He's always talking about this, and they have their opinions about it not being, considerably important. Look at America now. They're, it's not doing anything for you, blah, blah, blah. And the same argument can be made for freedom of speech itself. But, I think that sort of thinking is, well, I'm not trying to criticize anyone in our movement, but I think we need everything is what I'm saying. And I think people that criticize our freedoms, and by our freedoms I mean the freedoms that our people created for us, by us, as the Black Americans like to say, FUBU. That's how I think of our rights. It's like FUBU, for us, by us. I don't think we should. I don't think throwing those away or criticizing them is ever a viable solution. If we ever have, you have to have foresight, and getting rid of these sort of rights could lead to very a bad situation in the long term.
Certainly.
And I wanted to address Ameriphobia. Well, you go ahead, and then we'll get to
Ameriphobia. I was just.
I really went on a tangent there, or I digressed a lot.
It's an important thing to talk about because people are so nervous about it. We should not be nervous to talk about our basic Second Amendment rights. It's not just because we're talking about it and defending it doesn't signal anything that there's any kind of
we're not advocating for anything.
Right. So but this is such a portrayal of our condition that we're made to feel. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a liberal friend of mine recently, and I told him something about, getting ammunition or something or other. And he flipped out. He's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And he rattled off all the CNN points, and I wrote back to him like, dude, I'm not a caricature, I'm not like this tinfoil hat CNN, storm the Capitol bullshit narrative caricature. Like, calm down. And then he was saying, only the government should have guns. And I'm like, you're so insanely feminized. You're so feminized by the left. It's disgusting. But anyway, let's steer it back and get focused on this topic. What is Ameriphobia?
Well, it relates to this topic and a lot of other topics. It was just kind of a concept I thought up recently. Maybe someone else has thought of it before, but I've noticed that just like it's something that I've seen from like liberal Europeans and even liberal Americans. They hate the culture and the people, the values of heritage Americans, of course, the Second Amendment, but certainly other things. America's not perfect, but I really think that this, or maybe I said in the video I made recently that I think the label liberal is used a little too loosely, or it's kind of lost its meaning. But these sort of like urbanite leftists, leftist bugmen type people, these soylent people, what America should be, what America still kind of is, what it represents is deeply offensive to these people. And, when they criticize, when they attack us, they're also attacking their own, the right wing people in their own country that they also hate. because the idea of free range like European people is offensive to them.
It's insane. So the overall concept then is this this fear of heritage Americans.
I'll give you a good example. I did, yes, it's a fear of heritage Americans, but it's more than that.
Okay.
I forgot to mention. So I thought about making a video about this, but I don't know. One day, maybe when I can write out a good script for it or something, because it's not. I don't know if it's long enough for a video, but when I was in college, I went to a college with, it was like a private college, and there were a lot of rich kids, like kids that were millionaires from old money, and they like never even had their first job.
Wow.
And there were rich international students, and those people tend to be pretty liberal because they're insulated from reality,
Sure.
just from the wealth alone.
Right.
One guy that was close with he was like my sister also went to the school. I shouldn't know. All right, that's out there. He was close to my family, kind of, because I don't know, at the time, and I would often just hang out with him at the in the school cafeteria, and he would follow me on Facebook, and just like a fellow student, basically.
Gotcha.
Peers, right?
Sure.
This guy was from Switzerland. And Switzerland, you would think, oh, that would be like a really right-wing, gun-loving European country. Return of the Kings wrote an article about how Switzerland is the most masculine country in the world. This guy was he was like a white Swiss guy. He was like 5'3" though, and he had this, like, I don't know, you're kind of familiar with Nietzsche. I haven't read it in a long time, but the one concept I remember from Nietzsche was ressentiment, and I feel like he kind of was like one of these like emasculated, like European liberal types that kind of embodied that, even though he comes from a masculine country. He was always desperate to like criticize America and then talk about Switzerland and how multiculturalism works in Switzerland, even though most of their multiculturalism is like European. It's other European, it's like part German, part Spanish, or I don't know. It's Italian, it's French. He had a Spanish last name. I don't know how that worked out, but anyway. And I once posted something on my Facebook about the Second Amendment or something, and he commented saying, I don't think Americans should have guns because they're just so irresponsible. And I'm thinking, God, what a fucking hypocrite! Excuse my language.
That's fine.
And I mean, and this kind of intersects with the race issue, because you just can't talk about like gun violence in any of these countries without talking about the race issue. I mean, it's disingenuous, as other people in this movement have been pointing out for years. So that's what I think is like a good example of Ameriphobia. Is that people criticizing American culture? They'll say that we lack culture or rights or values, and to the point of being hypocritical or just insanely ignorant.
It's funny because I think your last video you posted was, I don't know the name of it, but it's basically a discussion about talking to a liberal friend of yours.
Oh yeah, phone conversation with a leftist.
There you go.
Urbanite, and it was really about the connection between leftism and people living in urban environments.
So your key point there were a lot of great spin-off points. I recommend everybody check that out, by the way. So the key point there was, this, that you see this whole conflict as between rural and urban people, the rural culture, urban culture. And you make solid points. I'm 100% in agreement with you. I think there's some classism in there too, the whole sort of rich versus middle class, poor, like that plays a role, but it's probably baked into the city versus country problem that you're laying out. And having just had this really disturbing and upsetting kind of interaction with this old friend of mine who is a liberal. We've never talked about politics, and then it came up because, like, whatever, I'm going off tangent here, but it just all struck all at the same time, that happening to me and watching your video. And so this topic of Ameriphobia, I could easily label him like he has Ameriphobia. I mean, just for one point, the idea of only the government should have guns. It's like, you don't know shit about America. You're not American if you think that.
Right.
Essentially American. And to look down your nose at me. I mean, so somebody commented on Twitter saying, like, we've all had this conversation a long time ago. We all lost our liberal friends a long time ago, as if, like, this is a moot conversation. And to be fair, like, he just didn't.
Was that on my video or something you posted?
I shared your video, and then he mentioned that, and I'm like, well, watch the video and then make a comment instead. But my point,
I can understand that.
It's perfectly normal. I was like, I actually do too. I'm like, yeah, why would we bring this up? But you're doing analysis on the psychology and the problem of it from, like, a class and a demographic frame, and all of those things are informative and helpful to understanding our problems, which we can then use to solve our problems, hopefully. So, but it's really tough to pull the personal stuff out of it, to separate, our personal experiences. But I'm kind of hogging the mic here. Maybe I'll hand it back to you. What are some other examples of Ameriphobia?
There's all kinds of examples. Even people within our own movement that live in other countries saying that it's like all Walmarts and McDonald's, or, I don't want to punch right, but I'm just saying I don't think that like, America does have culture, and it's just more regional. Like Canadian, smug liberal Canadians making fun of Americans while their country is, like, rapidly turning gay. Yeah. It's just people they're full of their own hot takes based off of something they saw in the news about our culture. And they think there are, like, mass shootings every day, or everybody is obese. Obesity is a problem here. I would say it's arguably the leading cause of death. But, it's not, I think it's like the way Americans think. People think that, I'm a bit tired, so you'll have to excuse me for being a bit slow here.
Oh, that's fine.
But if you just go on Twitter and you look up any sort of news article, something about America, if somebody's, like, posting something on Twitter, you'll always, I feel that you'll always find someone from, like, China or Europe or anywhere has some sort of, like, smart ass comment to make. I mean, the Chinese certainly think, for good reasons and bad reasons, that we're retarded over here. And I'm not saying that criticism of America is unwarranted. There are problems in this country, but it's I think that I'm just kind of sensing that people sort of have like a bone to pick or something.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing too, because
and there's the Amerimut meme. I should have mentioned that. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do it to ourselves too here on the so-called far right, where we make memes about conservatives and etc. But I think I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is we need to address this concept of, like, what is America? How does it tie together with the Constitution and the heritage Americans, with the original Europeans, etc. And then how do we think of ourselves? Because it all ties in. Right. It's the culture war. Okay, who defines who we are? We define who we are, but we live in a world where everyone else defines who we are. Everyone else controls our indigenous.
That's the problem. That's actually what I wanted to say. So you're asking me for more examples. A lot of the Ameriphobia comes from within the United States itself. Right. It comes from the mainstream media, Hollywood, and that creates the image of America that the rest of the world sees, and really forms their opinion of, middle America, rural America, oh, they're all just hicks, they're Amerimots, they're this. So, well, not the Amerimot meme, that comes from 4chan. That's another type of Ameriphobia. But anyway, because that one is not as true as people think it is. But yeah, certainly, Hollywood and the mainstream media paint this picture of America to the outside world, of America being just this land of redneck, rash, uncultured, immoral people, extremely materialistic, and so on and so forth. And you kind of saw this with during the election, of course. It was kind of like a virtue signal to counter signal, the Trump voters.
Mm-hmm.
So the people attacking the Trump voters and what Trump was represented, the things the people he was appealing to, the people that were, I mean, they're just, hating on America. Those are the Ameriphobes. And I think it's important to have that as a concept in our arsenal.
Hugely. That you're making a fantastic point. So let's, not focusing on the so-called far right and its critique of conservatives, but advocating more for a positive and self-actualizing identity dialectic. We have to push back in some way. Like, okay, it's Flag Day. I don't know, I remember when I went to school, Flag Day was the whole day was pretty, not the whole day, but you'd have like a half day, and the other half day there were, music and speeches and ceremonies, and it's Flag Day. It's you celebrated nationalism, and it was a beautiful thing, a fantastic thing. You not just because you got a half day of school, but because it reminded you in a more special and profound way. This is a special day set aside for us to think about what it is to be American, what it means, all the sacrifices, all the things that we've accomplished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a great sense of pride in being American, and that you had a tremendous love of your flag. And so that was part of your cultural character. So nowadays it's all, Q-tards and, MAGA-tards and all this kind of, they portray they portray Americans in general in this disgusting CNN caricature, like my so-called liberal friend was calling me, because he can't see me as me. I'm like, he's known me since I was 18, and I bring up like, I've got this and that, and I'm getting ammunition, and then it like triggers this whole like massive like brain diarrhea of all this garbage that comes out of his mouth about, oh, you're this kind of person. And I'm like,
yeah,
how can you forget a whole lifetime of friendship just because CNN told you that, guns are bad?
CNN gets to decide what's in the Constitution, apparently,
yeah.
Or what should be in there. It's like, it really is. I really think there really is the gun issue. I understand that it's a dangerous topic for a lot of people in this movement to talk about, but at the same time, it is an important issue on so many levels, not just for obvious reasons, but also it is like a sort of litmus test of, like I was talking about in my video, of like people, what people believe in their power relationships, being a free range person versus being a slave to a government that has essentially earmarked us as for, something not good. I really don't understand there seems to be factions within the what used to be the alternative right. That term is kind of dead, but it seems like they are strangely they're anti, they go back and forth between populism and elitism, and they want more government, at the same time they're against the establishment, and they can't seem to really make up their mind. But the idea of people being free to be able to control their political destiny is ordinary people is disgusting to them, which I think. Now my counter to that is that I think because I think they're looking at like the majority of white people as sort of being like cattle, right? And I can understand where they're coming from, but I think most people, given the opportunity, will do things in their ethnic interests. It's just that with white people, they won't do it explicitly. They're never going to explicitly be like nationalist with a capital N, if you know what I mean. Right? So instead, these movements like the MAGA movement, or even some elements of, ordinary conservatism, are kind of like, it's like implicit white identity, basically.
I guess that's the undercurrent there, isn't it? Right? We don't want whites to have power over their own destiny. We don't want them to be able to protect themselves from the anti-white. I'm speaking as a faux liberal here. How dare whites have guns on their property, and how dare you speak the truth, and all these all of the things that are the natural parts of our being culturally. And
it's part of our Indo-European culture, if you really want to go back like 6,000 years.
Wow, you go ahead and open that up, man.
Yeah, I think it really is a part of who we are and what made us who we are. And by tossing something, by having this anti-freedom attitude that I think some people in the dissident right have, they're spitting on their Indo-European roots. Their Indo-European culture and psychology is just like, they're throwing that to the wayside. And I don't think that is, they're doing that, and they don't even have any real influence or power over the government to begin with. So it doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, you can't appeal to authority if you don't have authority. They're not listening to us, right? So the best solution is for us to just, understand that it's not, to have foresight and not be, not put ourselves in situations where we're powerless, basically.
So here's a key point I need to illustrate. America is the most, I guess, the civilians of America are the most armed people in the world. I guess that's what I understand from.
Oh, no, it's absolutely true.
Okay, yeah. So how do you disarm hundreds of millions of people? You have to convince them somehow to give up their guns. So therefore, how do you do that? You undermine every single aspect of their identity, cut them off from their history, introduce a totally new dialectic, turn their people against each other, blah, 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 what we're living in now. And so you're creating the dialectic Ameriphobia is a fantastically powerful linguistic tool that we can now use against others in this argument. And I mean, anybody who is on the fence, let alone people against the Second Amendment, but people who are, say, kind of, I don't know, wishy-washy or something, that, want to just like get along. Let's all, go along to get along. So we have to be more bold, and we need more dialectic. This is something I've been calling on our movement to do more of, to create the language. We spend 90% of our time analyzing politics, complaining about politics, blackpilling each other. Granted, I know, you want to be on top of current events, et cetera, but let's take, at least half of that time and energy and put it into, think tanks, networking, all the things that a movement should have. I say a movement, you can't call it a movement if it's not moving. And
good point.
Where are we going? Well, we're not going anywhere if we're focusing all our time and energy on like complaining about the left. So there it is. And so you're coming up with just this one single dialectic, which is super powerful. This very, it's got a lot of power in it. that's okay. Somebody, you forged a tool, you forged a cultural weapon, so to speak, with this term. So everybody in the chat, everybody who watches this, if you're part of this movement, why wouldn't you share this video? You see, or why wouldn't you introduce this dialectic into your common discourse? We have some pretty good dialectic from Jason Kuhn on No White Guilt. We've gotten some from Richard Spencer. Where's the think tank action here, guys? Let's keep moving with this. So anyway, I'm again stealing the spotlight here.
Oh no, it's all good. Yeah, you're absolutely right about dialectic. Language is a tool, and the people that hate us, the Ameriphobes, they've understood that for a very long time, and they just naturally have a way with words and twisting language. And we have to, in order to control the narrative, you have to control the language and come up with new ideas, new terms. I mean, they love terms. They came up with racism and Islamophobia and homophobia and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And
there's still people completely like entranced by those words. I mean, even now, I would say the whole MAGA sphere, they still like words like racism. They're always like the left are the real racists, the Democrats are the real, like, get over it. I saw a hilarious meme today with those two sort of like I don't know if it's called the Wojak. It's like the profile of the blonde Aryan, and then there's a profile of a black man, and the Aryan says, I'm racist, and then the black guy says, I'm racist. White guy says, you want to grab a beer? The black guy says, yeah, let's go. So I was like, that's like where you're just like, okay, let's get over shit and move on. I mean, I'm not kind of discounting real racism or something or other, but like in how I'm trying to work it is I try to use the word race realism, which I learned from American Renaissance, which I believe I believe that Jared Taylor came up with this term, but someone can correct me on that. Anyway, anytime someone brings up the term racism, which is usually people on the right, like the standard middle of the road conservatives, because they're so scared about that, racist is the N word for whites, and every time
it really is that if we ever have power again, that should be the word that I'm all for freedom of speech, but that should be like the N word for white people. You can't call us that.
There you go. So there you go. I mean, maybe somebody can meme that, racist is the N word for whites. Maybe I'll do that, and just like slip it out into the Facebook sphere because I have like, whatever. I won't go there, but yeah, just to start pulling this stuff into their world and like arming them with these concepts, anyway, yeah. So I don't know. I feel like dialectic is so key to our movement.
It really is. And, pushing back against this. So, I when I went to college, I had leftist professors in the humanities that were telling me, one guy said that, we think in terms of language, and he was right about that. And the left, again, has understood that. They understand that intuitively. And, he was a hard leftist as the rest of them. And, so, you want to learn from your enemies. What are they doing? And that's something they really get right. And when you take back, so language is, for most people, language is like it's like a box. They're thinking inside this box, and that box is their language. It gives them the framework, the narrative, and they can only think. They're thinking in terms of language, so they're thinking within that box. And you have to give them a new box. You have to give them a bigger box. You have to give them, a way to think. If you give them new words, you give them the ability to think differently. And I think that's one way to convert more normies, is to just give them basically not a new language, but yeah, kind of, new terms, a new dialectic. Yeah.
Imagine if we had done this, say, 5 years ago, when Trump came into office and the culture war started, there's been a culture war for a long time, but I'm talking like up to Trump getting into office, and then last 4 years, it's been insanely heated. And you get where I'm going with this. And the right wing has just been like completely plowed under by the dialectic of the left. They've controlled. I mean, first of all, yeah, we know they control the media, etc. But it's more than that. People can watch TV and say, this is bogus, this is stupid, I don't buy it, because they're still like human beings and they have minds and they can discern things. But when they actually try to get into discussions or debates and they get slaughtered by all this faux dialectic, all this kind of engineered reality that's like all leftist, we lost the culture war in the last 4 years or so. So it's really, I just cannot emphasize enough how, it behooves us to start, pushing back and creating language. We on the far right, we're all, we get it. It's not so much for us. It's really to help the people kind of more in the middle to I guess, like the midwits. That was a little Ameriphobia, sorry. But, the people who are out there on Facebook still struggling and grappling. I always look at these relationships with those kind of people. These are your neighbors, people you went to school with, maybe some family members, coworkers. They're average people. They're not really sunk very deeply into the movement and what's happening. So they're frustrated out of their minds. They can't express themselves, and they, they're getting into like memes that are like memes that are real old and like dried up and that kind of thing. And they're just like, they can't go anywhere with it. So the point I'm making is like, let's help them. Let's design the tools of debate and language for them that can, empower them, help them feel a greater sense of understanding. So, and especially, okay, like today, for example, I shared a meme. It's the Batman slapping Robin meme, where Robin is saying, "Oh, it's a cabal of leftist, Marxist, blah, blah, blah," and Batman slapping him and saying they're anti-whites. And the idea being that it's a dialectic. Anti-white is a dialectic that's now in the mainstream. Thank God. And so we're able to use that, because if we try to break down all these little nuances, which are real and true, it gets into the bog of details, and people generally lose arguments, or they don't know they don't know the history of communism, or they don't know XYZ, and that, they're lost. Whereas if you just simply use this blanket term, this is anti-white, you're an anti-white, the anti-white agenda, anti-whites on CNN, XYZ, PDQ, then it covers the whole thing. It's kind of a nice, I don't want to say it's an overgeneralization. It's the opposite. It actually puts all of these things, it reveals the truth of the nature of these things. This ties back into what you were saying earlier, how Ameriphobia is this fear of heritage Americans who are
it ultimately isn't just, it ultimately though, I mean, it's just a concept to push back against them. It really isn't about American. It is like, I think Americans represent something that they don't want to see reemerge in Europe, for example. It's, when they attack Americans, they're not just attacking Americans. But they are, because Americans represent something that they don't want to see in other places. And because we're all sort of interconnected. I mean, Europeans in America are European, and Europeans in Europe are the same people, especially to this not the same exact people, yeah. but to this establishment in this context, you understand what I mean.
Oh yeah. This is interesting. Okay, last night I went out. I just tried to tie this in a bit. It's summertime, and I like to go clubbing. I like to go dancing. And so, but when I go dancing, I'm now in the belly of the beast. I'm out among the people who, their culture is far left. It's extremely multicultural. There's a lot of gays and all kinds of stuff that's not my world. And I don't like, I kind of go, I have fun. I hang out with a couple friends, maybe meet some ladies, this, that, have a little fun, and I'm gone. And I met a couple of guys close to my age, and we're just talking about this and that. And of course, everybody's talking about the pandemic, and all these things, and I feel them out. Like how sort of woke are you to the anti-white agenda? And we kind of walk down that path where we're checking each other out to see how far we can go to talk about right-wing issues. And so it's good to see that it's out there, even in an environment as leftist as this, and then to give them essentially the reassurance and the okay that, yeah, we are a people, we have to stand up for ourselves. We need to be like, I don't know how to say this, like there's nothing bold and brave about just speaking up for your identity, representing your self-interests, your people, etc. Right? That there's nothing radical about that. In the current context, the left makes it look like it is. As soon as you bring up anything to do with white identity, the harpies come out, and then shrieking, etc., etc. So I think, again, with dialectic, we should be able to be more confident in these places, because I can easily say things to say, like my leftist friend or my liberal friend who complained about guns, where I was explaining to him, he's trying to talk about like, this is racist and da 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 da.
Did he actually say that having guns is racist?
No, I'd have to get into the meat.
I'm sure they feel that, even if they can't articulate it. I'm sure like that's the image.
Sure. It's all tied together. It's like a huge thread with all these little beads on it, and every bead is a different topic. But the thing that ties them all together is whatever you do, knock down the whites, disassemble them, separate them, crush their spirits, because we don't want Germany to rise up again in America. And that's the like Nazi.
That's exactly gets back to what I was saying about Ameriphobia being about more than, it really is about more than Americans, but Americans represent something that they don't want to, because when they attack Americans, they're attacking, they're attacking heritage Americans, they're attacking Europeans that they haven't fully subjugated yet.
Yeah, it opens up a pretty big can of worms, and I'm trying not to go off to too many tangents, but I do think
it's hard.
Well, the term Ameriphobia does invite it, though, because it's such a big topic. So like if I were to say to my college friend, why are you Ameriphobic? I know I can tell you right off the bat, like the squirming would be intense. It would be. Well,
that's how you know it's working. That's what you want.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll interject here. So I wanted to get back to talking about language. I think what we need in this movement, we have a lot of like really high IQ people, that are very well read. They're good at political analysis.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think what we need are more strategists, pragmatic, cultural strategists, people that, can war game these cultural scenarios and the dialectic back and forth. Kind of like we kind of had this going on in 2016 with Trump and the memes, but it's died down since. Yeah. But people that are just sitting there and thinking, how can I make these people squirm? How can I have more how can I take the language back and have more terms in my toolbox? Someone that was great at this that unfortunately doesn't blog anymore, that I think people need to go back and read, is Royce, aka Chateau Artiste. He was from the Manosphere. I don't know if you ever read him.
Oh yeah, it's weird. I haven't heard that name in a long time. Yeah. Can you cite any sort of examples of things that he's done?
So even before the migrant crisis, he went from the Manosphere to being, well, he was still in the Manosphere. He was still writing Manosphere stuff, but he started getting into nationalism, and the migrant crisis really, he started writing, because of that, he started writing more about nationalism, white nationalism. And so he really, he was writing about a lot of that stuff before, before 2015. Yeah. He coined the term clown world.
Oh my God. Wow.
I think he coined soy boy, shit lib,
Awesome.
And he was just he was a wordsmith. I mean,
Right.
if you go back and read his blog,
Okay.
and his blog was entertaining. Another thing we need in this movement is we need it to be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
It needs to be fun.
You just inspired me. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to create it like a dialectic contest or something like where, on X day, submit your dialectics for, whatever the topics may be. And there's so many of them. And then, but to have it be fun, an actual fun thing, and then maybe give away a gift or something, have some kind of a, first prize, second prize, just to, I mean,
I don't think it should be a forced effort. I think people should go read Royce, aka, or his blog is called Chateau Artiste. He used to be called Royce, but that's the person behind it. And kind of get some inspiration for that and start writing. I think people should write, and not as an intellectual or a philosopher. I'm not saying philosophy is great, but this movement needs to be fun, and it needs to be more strategic. Especially in the dialectic cultural sense. And when you're writing and when you write a lot, you start to develop you have a way with words. I don't sound like I have a way with words right now because I'm extremely tired.
Sorry.
But if you read my content on Telegram, or you read Chateau Artiste, Chateau Artiste, even if you don't enjoy reading blogs, it's addictive. I hardly have ever. It's hard to not like. That's what I was reading instead of Moldbug. I don't. These people in our movement. I've had some harsh criticisms of the neo-reactionary types. I found his Moldbug's material to just be kind of, I'll just say it, faggoty. It was just the gayest, and he is nothing against. I mean, I don't want to get into that, but it wasn't like, it was just this meandering, crap. And I went back to reading Chateau Artiste, and it was fun. And this guy, everything he posted, you could hear like 1,000 liberals crying.
Wow. I just I picked him up, and I put his link in the chat there. Actually, I'll definitely revisit that. Something I'm super interested in is how we in the arts can use the dialectic. So, for example, if I were to do a series of paintings on the term Ameriphobia, for example, or poems on the theme, or songs on the theme, etc., you could see how that could take the dialectic to a much stronger level.
I think there's a problem though, and I think what you're doing is good. It's smart. You're thinking in the right direction, but like you're trying to like, who are you making this art for, right? Are you trying? Because I feel like it's hard for us to. I think it's going to be hard for us to use the same tactics that the BIPOC use to guilt trip like white people that are easily guilt tripped, if you will.
Let me address that question. For starters, that's the question. That's one of the most central questions that artists actually overlook a lot of the time. Who are we making the art for? And I believe this actually came up in some recent discussions on American Zarathustra or in White Art Collective. But anyway, this is a tricky question, because as an artist, you kind of have these two paths. It's art for yourself, or art that you get paid for, and it has a kind of a purpose that you're, like a mission, or you're selling something, whatever. So these two things can overlap, obviously. The artists I know and work with, I would say generally they tend very much towards making art for themselves, meaning they have a feeling or an idea or a thought or an experience that they need to translate into their art form. And say like one of them or some of them may come across this feeling of Ameriphobia, even though there was no word for that, right? And then write a song about it, about like, I'm sick of being called this and that and the other thing, or whatever. I'm proud to be American, blah, blah. Proud to be an American. Sorry, I went down that road there, but it's a Trump song anyway. So they're going to do that on their own. and they have that. It's sort of like the artist's privilege. It's the artist's freedom to choose what they want to do. So fair enough. There's that. And then we're in a movement, though, right? We're in a white positive movement. And if, let's say the white art collective per se is the art movement of the white positive movement, then it seems to me like there should be maybe more discussion about what could we do to, say, maybe get more organized or use the dialectics in ways that each individual creator is comfortable with, that doesn't feel forced. Because I think that's kind of what you're approaching here, is like how it can't be fake, it can't feel unreal, it can't feel preachy. It has to be a natural, organic outgrowth of our culture.
Yeah.
So that's all good and well. I think we're on the same page. It's just that I still think we need more dialectic. I integrate Jason Kuna's dialectics into my lyrics of my songs. And when I sing that, I'm singing it for our people. So that is my audience. Now, when I show that, or people show my songs to, people outside of our sphere, they're kind of, a wave goes over them like, you can't be so proud to be white. You can't. This guy's saying what you can't say. Like, we all think it, but we don't say it. And then, half of them is like, holy shit, run for the hills, cover your face, like, don't let anybody know, that kind of thing. And the other half is, wow, I'm attracted to this. I want to be a part of this. So when you make a work of art of any kind, it's like it has its own life after it. You've birthed it. It's out there in the world. And it's got to live on its own merits, or die on its own lack of merits, whether it's good or bad. So we have to be careful not to be preachy. I agree with you.
Well, I wasn't saying that anyone was preachy, but yeah, I think I understand what you mean. I think all of the artists and all of the people in this movement need to follow their gut. I think the movement needs to be fun again. That'll help. And I also just think it might be difficult to employ all of the same tactics that the BIPOCs used. I'm calling them BIPOCs. For example, if you were to paint a painting of people in South Africa, crying or suffering, I don't think that's going to touch white liberals the same way as if they saw like a painting of black children crying. That's what I was trying to get at. No, I'm not saying you shouldn't take that angle. We definitely need people to do that, but it might be better to just make them squirm. Yeah. And it would be more fun for all of us. It might be more effective to do that, and to just, come up with terms that just kind of fry their circuitry.
Right. See, because there you hit it. That was an excellent way to put it, because, when I was, let me start and go back to that. My liberal college friend, for starters, he's a writer. He's a brilliant guy, but and a great sense of humor, blah blah blah. But there's something about liberals, especially like smart liberals, not kind of like crazy pink-haired wackos. They are like, I don't know how to say this. They're like warriors of words. They know, they're extremely clever at crushing other people, at hurting other people. They take immense pleasure in torturing people.
Hurting their own herd.
Yeah, there you are. And so I know with him that if I have like a frontal assault and I like dismantle every single one of his talking points with facts, that's it. It's the end of the friendship right there. And I'm like trying to, save this friendship. Part of it is like, I'm just at a place where I've got a lot more on my plate, and I would really like to not lose another friend. It just, I don't need that in my life, and saving him or enlightening him isn't going to really change anything. You see where I'm going? Like, he's just one guy. I don't know. I'm just, you choose what hill you want to die on, as you say,
right?
What battles you're going to have. So I talked around the topic in a very playful, confident manner. And I did not directly answer any of his bullshit assumptions of me being racist and assumptions of me being some wacko that wants to, like, you know, storm the Capitol building and blah, all these false narratives that he's living under, because, you know, he's liberal. He has that false sense of security through, as you say, consensus. This is an excellent point you brought up in your video, in your last video about liberals. They have this false sense of security through consensus with each other, and so they just keep the echo chamber, you know, ringing and ringing and going with all this, you know, virtue signaling. It's a sick, weird, surreal, anti-natural culture, right? They don't they don't have problems, so they invent problems, or they take on the problems of other people as their own. It's just twisted as hell. Anyway, where am I going with this?
Does it segue into urban versus rural? Should we get into that?
Let me finish my point first. So when I use terms like, you know, for example, I said it would take a great deal of energy and effort to deny the anti-white system now, because it's explicitly and openly talked about in the mainstream media, and it's aggressively pursued in the Democrat Party agenda, and with like all these states that are making critical race theory against the law. So, and then I kind of, you know, zoomed into some fun conversation. And so, like, packaging the idea and those dialectics and those facts into one sentence like that, it gets a like the short circuit where, like, holy shit, I can't fight that, you know, and if I do, I'm being the asshole, then I'm going to hurt my friend. And in the end, I said, look, 90% of people choose ego over truth. They choose
right. They don't care about the truth.
And even conservatives are like that about a lot of topics, but I'm not going to attack them. That's kind of a human problem, but with the left, it's a problem that is bringing the death of the West, you know. Whereas, you know, like, you know, that was the discussion.
Conservatives, the issue with a lot of like normie white conservatives, and this is just an issue with white people in general. Kevin McDonald talks a lot about this. Genetically, white people are the least ethnocentric. So in order for them to exercise any ethnocentrism, it has to be done often implicitly rather than explicitly. So it might be hard for them to say that they're against, you know, this country becoming less white or anti-white policies, but a word like Ameriphobe kind of gets around that because it doesn't address the issue directly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say this is Ameriphobic, that could be a way for them to say something is anti-white without directly saying that.
That's brilliantly said, because I think that's what the left is fighting. They're trying to redefine America as this mishmash, multicultural, liberal world, which it is not. You know, I mean, yeah, I guess half of it is, but it's not the natural, historic, true America, as I guess I would call it. And in fact, I would even say there's enormous amounts of, say, people of color, et cetera, that don't buy into the liberal agenda either, that they have zero voice. They have no platform at all, you know, or very little. But anyway, it's funny though, because here, like the term phobia is clearly a leftist kind of term, like homophobia. And years ago, we all looked at, okay, well, homo means same, phobia means fear of sameness. You know, like we try to dissect it. And for the longest time, people were winning the LGBT argument with that word alone. They would just say, oh, you're homophobic? Oh my God, you know, and people would just shrivel. And
it had an incredible amount of power.
It did. And so that pisses me off beyond measure. But anyway, to me, it's all like passe and like silly and stupid now. But anyway, the left responds to the term phobia. So whether we like it or not, or whatever, however you want to frame it, it does work. It does have power, even to sort of midwit conservatives as well. So, but it's taking their weapon out of their hands and using it back against them. So I think there's something to be said for that. I like the term anti-white because it's just so damn straight, you know, it's so plain and simple. It doesn't involve like all this psychology and history and context, and so anyway, what was the next topic we were going into?
I was going to say I like to say that things are anti-white too, but I don't think that a lot of mid-wit conservative types, normie cons, it's not going to carry with them simply because they don't like touching race. White people do not like feeling like they're excluding others. It's just not. I mean, if it's not in there, I mean, yes, in the past, you whites have been ethnocentric and have had ethnocentric policies like everybody else. Most countries are ethno-states, just to put it plainly.
Yeah.
But it's not. There is this tendency psychologically within whites to they believe in meritocracy, for example, more than anyone else, and that kind of. That would be fine in a racially homogenous society, but so there's these ancient psychological tendencies towards inclusion, and the only way to get around that, I think, for normie, when we're trying to guide normie whites, if you will, I'm not trying to speak of them as if they're cattle, but the way to help them out is to give them terms that are more implicit and fun.
Yeah, beautifully said. It definitely helps it to become more memeable. Maybe I should draw like an Ameriphobe, like some goofy, poorly drawn, person with that.
Yeah, just think of like the Starbucks hipster, and just hating on Americans. I don't know how you would do it, but there's so many real examples that you could just draw somebody.
So it ties in interestingly with your last video, and there was you just brought it up a little while ago, and I had to finish my point, and I lost what the point was. You wanted to move on to another topic.
Rural versus urban.
Correct. Okay. Could you expand on that topic? Explain it for the audience.
I kind of just when I came up with that. I mean, I'm probably not the first person to talk about it, but I'm just drawing upon my own experience from living in a rural environment and an urban environment back and forth.
Yeah.
And there is just this noticeable correlation between urban living and what we would conceive of as shit libs or, neoliberal values or just leftists, and how they think of themselves and the world around them and power. I think Nietzsche talked about some of this stuff, not in the way I'm talking about it, but I haven't read Nietzsche in a long time, so I'm rusty. But their will to power is like really screwed up, and it's like, and that gives them all this, things like ressentiment, if I'm using that word correctly in this context, where they like white people, rural white people, their independence, their strength, their ability to handle business, in more than one way, is offensive to these people, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're dependent on the system. They're dependent on the people, the immigrants that are moving into their city, and they're, Ted Kaczynski would say they're over socialized. So that kind of leads them, further into this psychology of extreme inclusivity, because they need consensus and so on and so forth. So they're psychologically stressed out people. Mm-hmm. And they when you live in an urban environment, you live in a box, you work in a box, you're surrounded by people. Depending on how urban it is, the more the worse. And if you're in that environment for too long, or at least most people, or they're certainly if they're born and raised in that environment, it's hard for them to imagine having like real power for themselves. And that lack of even conceiving of like real power for themselves, I think affects their ability to think about like something like nationalism or certainly gun rights, freedom of speech. They have to be careful what they say, because they're surrounded by people. And that means that they can't think for themselves, and so on and so forth. It creates all of these problems. And they're they're like basically the equivalent of human livestock. Yeah, that was the example I gave in my my video. That's yeah.
So I lived in New York City for 3 years. I've lived in a couple different cities throughout my life. But looking back at this particular college friend I was talking about, I love him as a friend, and I don't have any malice at all. I'm just describing him in the context of what you're talking about. He is I don't know how to say this. He's a master of the language of being an urbanite. So what does that mean? Everything you just said, where language has to be policed, right? You have thought police, you have political correctness. He's a master of that, in that he knows all the talking points. He knows what's, every little nuance about what's right and what's wrong. And he knows how to, like, he's good at parties is what I'm saying.
He has to police you, because it has to be, he's policing himself. And if he's policing himself, he has to police other people.
That's twisted in a very, it's extremely insightful for you to say that, because he can't be who he is if I am who I am, and therefore he has to break me down into all these little CNN talking points.
And you having this ability to, not have a PC policeman in your head like he does, because he's over socialized,
right,
is offensive to him.
It's threatening to him.
That's like you being like just a white guy that thinks he can do whatever he wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable area. I mean, he and I have never talked politics. It's always just been life stuff. How's your son? What's your new job? Blah, 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 your new relationship, something. And, laughing about old memories in college, yada, yada. But, he reached, well, I just said, hey man, how you doing? It's been a while since we talked. And he wrote back and he said, I've been really worried about you. I can't remember exactly how he put it, but it basically was in the context of the Biden administration, and like, so he said it without saying it, kind of thing. Whereas like, I've been really, because he knows that I do this pro-white media stuff. Yeah, well, he doesn't know as much as, like, there's no danger is what I'm trying to tell you. So anyway, long story short, that's what opened the topic, is like, prior to Biden, it's like, oh, okay, whatever, it's just a thing you're interested in, something or other. It's not like the main topic we always talk about. But now that Biden came into office and, everything is like anti-white. I mean, in your face all day, every day. Even he can't deny it, so I'm worried about you. Like, what's going on? So I just said, oh, this and that. I've got some security protocols. And when I use the term security protocols, he snapped. Like, what are you talking about, security protocols? And then saying only the government should have guns. And I'm like, are you even listening to yourself? You think you're so damn smart. But here you're basically saying, I shouldn't protect myself. That I should have no right to protect myself, and that I should utterly surrender all my rights and protection to the government. And, that what is wrong with me that I can't, like, protect myself on the basis of being white in an anti-white system? So he's basically acknowledging the thing that he's denying while he's explaining these things to me and trying to thoughtfully into this kind of like box of like, you must think like I do, become the NPC like the rest of us, And this is thing that probably drives me mad more than anything, is how stupid these intellectuals are. How like I don't know, like they almost brag about how stupid they are in the sense that they can't put together these basic, simple, common sense things. Where does it all come from? Anti-whiteism. If so long as you hate yourself and you hate whites and you hate Western civilization and you have to somehow be a part of the culture, explicitly or implicitly, then you're the hunted. Now it's the Hunger Games, and you better start running. And then and they don't want to be part of us. All these, like, he was basically saying like, are you like into QAnon, and are you like some kind of magatard?
I'm imagining he has like a very intense lisp.
He doesn't, but
I mean, the way you describe him, I can't. I'm sorry. That's what I'm imagining.
It's just think California. That's all I have to say.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, but there's no lisp or anything. But anyway, I'm just saying that, like, the guy that I went to college with came from a kind of an average, small city, town, rural, sort of normal American life, and then through the college system, and then moving into media and writing. And if you want a job in writing, you have to say what people want to hear, and you have to be a master at like seducing them with their own words and their own ideas, etc.
Does he live in an urban environment now?
Very.
Okay. So it sounds like to me he's just a normie that caved into extreme peer pressure and just, kind of gave up on being a human being that can, that has, he just kind of gave up his critical thinking abilities, if he ever had them, just so he can move up to his move up the corporate ladder or whatever in his profession.
I think it's I would frame it more as a survival.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
You would have to. It's nobody knew. I mean, talk about the slow boiling frog. I mean, going from the 90s to now, like it just all happens. Imagine telling someone in the 90s that there's every corporation is gonna celebrate homosexuality for a month, and you can't order food at a restaurant without seeing pictures of transsexuals, that all this like insane shit that we're living in right now. Nobody would believe that. It's dystopian, right? And of course the COVID shit, nothing's unbelievable now, but so I don't kind of blame him. I feel that very, very, very many people just kind of drank the Kool-Aid, little by little they were poisoned more and more. And then the what was it? The bar kept kind of raising, or however you want to put it, moving the goalpost, or however you want to put it.
Right.
Getting more and more in extreme, but by little increments. I can remember Brokeback Mountain came out, the movie. And anyone who knows me, I'm extremely anti-LGBT. I'm extremely anti that. And I would never see a disgusting movie like that. And he did see it. And he was visiting me in my smaller town after living in a bigger city. And he brought in the whole like, oh, I'm from the big city, and I'm all you small town people, I'll impress you with my worldliness and everything. And he went on to talk about this film, and I said, that's disgusting. And then he had like a shocking moment where he's like, oh, you can't say that. That's not politically correct. And right in that moment, that's where slam, I just like snapped off, and I'm like, F you, F all of you people. You cannot tell me how I feel about something disgusting like that, you cannot change my inner nature to like fit your weird social protocols. It's demented, in like a 1984 kind of way. So that's kind of the moment where I realized, oh my God, man, because we were all sort of, we grew up with that kind of 60s rock revolution, man. And yeah, peace in the world and brotherhood. Yeah, man, it's all cool. Well, yeah, that just softened us up for Marxism, But anyway, I'm kind of going off on some stories here, just related to this topic.
It just goes to show how much foresight the elites have, or the establishment, the Ameriphobes, the international Ameriphobes. Foresight is everything, and they understand that to kill us, it's the way to go is death by 1,000 cuts.
That's brutal. I don't know if people in the audience actually know that method of execution in China. But
is that a real thing? I just know it as an expression.
It's not.
The Chinese are pretty brutal.
Oh my God! If you tried to assassinate the emperor, there was a special death by 1,000 cuts. I don't know, what do you call it? Not an execution, that they forced you to drink some kind of a concoction that would keep you awake while they literally cut every part of your body off slowly until your head, and it's the darkest thing you can imagine. It's really, really dark. So I know that term is rough, but in a sense, it's not. The analogy actually is perfect, right? I mean, the emperor. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little too symbolic here, but yeah, we've had all these tiny little cuts right along the way, and we've been changed. We've been mutated. That's how I think of it. Our culture has been mutated. I think of the left as like a cancerous tumor on America, and I challenge anybody to say I'm wrong about that.
It is like they are like a cancer, and we need chemotherapy, and that might mean the end of the end of civilization might be the only way to. I mean, well, I guess I could get into it more, but this goes back to the rural versus urban thing. I think one thing we should definitely advocate for is our people that think the way we do, and heritage Americans, Europeans, living a more rural way of life, so that they can become more self-sufficient and pull away from the system, civilization, and if they can sustain themselves, perhaps be less involved in the economy, and these people would be forced to basically, their cities would just fall apart, I think, without the talent of our people maintaining their upkeep.
This is one of the things that I really like about your content and your perspective is the push towards, I guess, ruralism. It's hard to say, the idea of like more going back to the country, more going back to nature, more self-reliance. And that all of that
that's American culture.
There you are. That's heritage America.
And that's really European culture, I should say, originally. I don't think city living is natural or healthy, especially not for our people.
Interesting point. That opens up a whole other topic of conversation. But as it applies to our movement, you've made really, really strong points about, as you say, people being over socialized, how disconnected they are. They don't. It's funny, like just the concept of defund the police. That's what I mean about intelligent stupidity.
I think they should defund the police, and we'll be in the countryside, being able to protect our families, and they can be in the cities with they can have their immigrant police or something. It doesn't even matter at that point.
Well, I mean, this I don't know how snarky you're being with that answer or how honest you are about that, but it would. Where am I going? So this opens up the topic of like, is America going to split in terms of like you've got rural and you've got city and country folk? Can it split in that way? It's already split culturally that way, politically that way.
Yes.
How far will it go?
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but we're already seeing that split. And I just noticed that, again, there's always exceptions. There are good people in the cities and bad people in the countryside. But generally, what I see is that rural people are just, because of their living conditions, their environment, are forced to live a certain way that reinforces, a natural lifestyle and healthier ways of thinking about the world, which includes, naturally being, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not. I don't want to use the language from the left, but we don't have enough terms in. We need to take our language back.
I know.
But so to avoid using the leftist terminology, I would say the people in rural areas are more, they value loyalty and trust,
Yeah, sure.
and it's in a way that is not available to everyone. You know, it has to be earned. You have to, you really have to be a good person, a dependable person, and it's done in a much more natural way, and usually that means people of the same race. It's just inevitable in that situation.
Very
Whereas
true.
in the city, the only way to do that is to be naively open and available to everyone, and get screwed over. And I think like other ethnic groups can excel in urban environments, but I think where white people excel is in rural environments, because that's where we come from.
No.
That's what we're made for. We're not made for these like Middle Eastern people, Semitic people, and to some degree Chinese people are more made for, well certainly Chinese people are more made for city living, because these people are the descendants of Neolithic farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really go back in history, like white people for most of their history were living in rural environments, which really is given them the psychological characteristics that they have. That they have. Like it's one of the reasons why I think that they're more meritocratic, because their survival depended on it more. Whereas with these farming civilizations, they were more clannish. So in an urban environment, they can maintain ethnic boundaries more explicitly, more overtly.
I think there's an important distinction to make here as well, that cities in Europe in history compared to cities in America are, especially now in the modern age, there's obviously a big difference in that. Okay, you had people of your same country in your cities, so it's not necessarily about it being a city, but whereas in modern America, cities are super multicultural environments. So
that makes it even worse. Yeah,
that's where I'm going.
But these non-white groups that are living in our cities in America and Europe are accustomed to. I think they're more accustomed to let's just say a low trust urban environment.
It's weird. I was just out in the suburbs where I grew up, that is sort of kind of on the border of the countryside. And instinctively, I got out of my car and I locked the door and I checked the door. And then I thought, no, it's not that bad yet. I'm not, and I intentionally unlocked my car, and opened the windows, just to be like, no, I refuse. I reject this paranoia. I'm home. I'm in this white environment where I can be at ease at home and feel healthy and whole again, so I'm going to leave my car unlocked. It's a silly little thing in a way, but it points to a far greater issue that we all deal with,
Well, there's certainly, it's, crime is rampant because of drugs all over the US, but what I'm thinking more of in terms of is just the clannish nature, the ethnocentric nature of these non-white groups that are these non-white people, these other races that are living in our cities, like going to DC and you see these enclaves of like Ethiopians, for example. Or like Chinatowns in America, and certainly Vancouver. They really know how to do soft colonialism.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. It's interesting because it's, I guess again, once, as I grew up, you have every town in America has a Chinese restaurant, and it was weird because you'd be like, where do they live? Where do they shop? Where do they play? Like, it's the only place you ever saw them was in the restaurant,
They don't, they're not, yeah. They'll like bus people in from another town or something. It's really weird. It's like how they only hire Asians.
Well, I know now that basically like I don't know how it was when I was growing up, but how it is now is that these restaurants have, I don't know, agents of some kind in China, and then every couple months they roll out new staff. They'll ship in new ones, give them all work visas. They can barely speak English, they know how to say, can I have some more duck sauce or whatever. But and then they push them out and put more in, and it's a weird industry in a sense. But where I'm going with that is it's very insular. It's not like the soft colonialism of, say, the Cantonese in Vancouver or Toronto or something.
Well, they're pretty insular too, aren't they? I mean, I know that they'll assimilate on some superficial level, like the rich Chinese people like to hang out on yachts and drink wine, but they also have, their Chinese communities, and I remember seeing a video of like a mall in Vancouver, and it was like a food court. It was all Chinese restaurants. It was like a Chinese shopping mall in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And that is really, really something.
That's a giant other topic, which I know a ton about, and it's very interesting. It's not so negative as, like, say, the migrant crisis that we're facing, but it like
replacement is replacement. They're just it's in their case, it's a pain-free death. I remember going to Toronto when I was young, and like I went to a mall in Toronto, and it was all these Chinese people and all these Chinese restaurants around the mall. And there was, I think, the only non-Chinese person I saw in this part of downtown Toronto. There was like a black security guard in the mall or something. That was it.
Yeah,
and that's just incredible,
Plus the competition for jobs. I really think we have to. I'm strongly for not having foreign students come to American universities. I'm extremely adamant about that. Obviously, I have no power to institute it, but think this through. Why in the heck are we giving our technology, our education to our competitors in overseas? It's imbecilic. It's imbecilic. And I don't, but again, this goes back to the decentralization of white identity through all these dialectics and all the death by 1,000 cuts, as you call it, which I would rather say is the slow boiling frog, because it's less disturbing. But it really is all that. And, it's strange when you've got, let's say, for example, in my town, there are these Muslim owned smoke shops. And I know how they operate. They're my friend, I give you a special deal, we're friends. And they disarm whites with all this kind of marketplace talk where they know how to hustle. And just, suburban whites, they don't have any of that. It's just meritocracy.
That comes from, they've had urbanite culture for much longer. I mean, these people are at least part Mesopotamian,
Yeah.
They probably had Sumerian ancestors that were doing that like 4,000 or 5,000 years ago.
It's baked into the culture.
It's in their DNA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough thing for me to say, scientifically, but I can say for sure it's there. And that comes back to the topic of making our people more street savvy. It's like there's a fox in the hen house kind of thing. We're not built for that because we're built for dealing with each other. And
right.
So anyway, that's all the more reason why we need more dialectics to train our people to know how to handle these race hustlers.
I think what would be, I mean, Europeans build fantastic cities, but at this point, I think cities got to go. It would just be, our situation would be much easier if we did not have urban areas.
I don't know how that would happen, but I think that there's any amount of different ideas you can imagine.
I think I'm just talking about if there could be, like, for example, there could be rural lifestyle movement. We're kind of seeing this already, like with the prepping community, and it is just so implicitly white. I mean, it's like the prepping community is as white as libertarianism, and I don't think any of these people necessarily think much about race, but their gut is kind of telling them to get away from these areas that are not as white as, like they're not thinking in terms of race, because I think it's hard for most white people to think about it in explicit terms, but in implicit ways, again, like being preppers and living in rural areas where inevitably there's going to be a lot less diversity. And if more white people can be influenced to leave cities and live at least in small towns, or
So
live on a.
There's a rational and reasonable answer right there. If whites can be convinced to leave cities and reestablish themselves in smaller towns,
Not all of them will do it, but enough. But if more of them do it, the situation in the cities is going to force the rest of the white people remaining there to leave. So it's like white flight into the countryside, and that's going to be the last white flight. And then the cities are going to turn into, Johannesburg or something, and just it'll just collapse, I think. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of imagining the possibilities. I don't really know, but that would be my best guess of what could happen.
Escape from New York comes to mind, the movie.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because I feel like this is a very cruel and uncompassionate thing to say, but it's sort of what you tolerate is what you deserve. And people like my friend in college, I don't know how long it's going to take until he realizes, oh my God, California is a hellhole. I got to get out of here. I didn't grow up in this kind of insanity. I have to leave, but money has a lot to do with it. Somehow people who are elite, they're able to kind of float above all this and kind of look at the tent cities that are growing in the parks and all the various garbage, all the illegal immigrants. They don't care that whites are being raped, robbed, and murdered in higher and higher rates. It just so long as they can feel like, oh, I voted for Biden, and I'm wearing a mask. It's like, well, then stay in that environment and get what you deserve, because we don't want the phenomenon of Californians moving to Texas, where now Texas is turning purple, if you will.
I think it's just, in a way, I hate to say this, it's a good thing that in some of these areas, there is more hostility and open Ameriphobia, anti-white sentiment, because it's just forcing these people to wake up, and by leaving these areas, even if they have to do so by force, California without white people is going to be it's going to be a disaster.
Absolutely.
It's going to be the same thing in New York and a lot of other major cities, Chicago.
So,
and
I want to interrupt you a little bit. Did you finish your point? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to go on. I think, maybe that's what we need, and maybe by white people being forced to live in a more rural lifestyle, or sub-rural, whatever, that will bring about the political shift among the majority of our people that we need to.
I totally hear you now, because this is something that I learned by Biden stealing the election, is that whites won't change until shit hits the fan. And it sucks and I hate it, but it's just the way it is. And things have to get super bad for them to go, oh my God, and now it's almost too late. And that's when change occurs. So Biden getting into office has done more to wake people up to white, I don't know how to say it, the white identity movement, as I'd like to call it now, and it's changing. The times are changing. They're getting worse, but our people are waking up in some regard in a kind of a spectrum. So I don't want it to get worse. I don't like this path. I'm not for it. I don't want to accelerate it. I've never been an accelerationist, but I'm seeing that they're right to some extent, that, these things. I didn't catch that. What was that?
Oh, I was going to say, to me, America is not these cities. It's not the country. It's the people.
Mm-hmm.
So, the idea of like balkanization at this point, to me, it's, I mean, it seems inevitable, and it would probably be a good thing for the future of the American people. So it's like, America as a entity, as a country, the United States may in the future, be something else. It may cease to exist, and you might have balkanization. But I think if things go to hell more rapidly, but which is how, I mean, that just seems to be, again, how things are moving along, thanks to the establishment. I mean, the establishment is accelerating all of this. We're just, we're not doing anything. And it'll, in some ways, it'll work out in our favor.
Mm-hmm. So as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking through we should have even more dialectic for all these various topics that we're talking about. So, for example, what would be I'm not saying we need to do this right now, this second, but we should contemplate or try to figure out, in our think tanks, if you will, what would be a good dialectic for this rural versus urban topic that we're talking about now, or a dialectic, say, encouraging whites or representing whites that leave cities because of the way they are with multiracial populations, leftist governments, et cetera, and try to get every little aspect of the whole political discourse and have our own dialectic for almost every phenomenon. The left pretty much has that. They drive the discourse with these dialectics, and obviously dialectics change the perception of reality and in some sense create reality. So
it really does create reality for especially for these people.
There you are. I mean, the urgency of our people to work on these topics, it could not be more, I couldn't overstate that more. So, I know that it's fun for people to come and watch the shows and chat and have a good time. And I love that. I love our community so much. I adore our community, but I also feel like let's all take a little bit of responsibility on this. Think about it, kind of sleep on it, so to speak, when you're driving to work, or driving home, talking about it with friends, sharing the video. If you come up with ideas for new dialectics to describe this phenomenon of like saying things like white replacement, or white genocide. Look at that. Talk about a powerful dialectic. A lot of people, that throws them immediately. They want to deny it. Like, what are you talking about? White genocide? That's absurd. That's insane. You're off your rocker, your tinfoil hat. And then, because they don't see the death by 1,000 cuts, they think of it like, colonization and Native Americans and the Holocaust and ABCDFG, all that stuff. So white replacement is a term you can use and have like a civil conversation, and they'll say, all right, well, yeah, whites are being replaced because they should, because colonization and the Holocaust, they're still gonna do their bullshit. They're still gonna live their lies, but at least we can enter the conversation with some leverage where we can say, no, here are the statistics, or here's the culture, or here, blah, blah, blah. Try to drive the narrative. I don't feel there's any hope, or I have no energy or interest in trying to change liberals' minds. They're not going to change. They've drank the Kool-Aid. They're gone. And as far as I can tell, and like my college buddy, like I want to keep that friendship. I love him. He's a very, very dear old friend. Yes, he's doped up completely on Marxist bullshit, but I have to I don't know. I mean, this is the age we're living in, you've got family members, friends, people. How much should we take that on, and how much should we leave it alone? I mean, that's probably going to boil down to every individual and how they approach these things.
Well, again, so to address some things you were talking about, so we need to work on our dialectic so that we can dog whistle more and have different ways of touching on these subjects, sometimes without explicitly mentioning race, because a lot of white people, in their heart of hearts, in their gut, they side with us instinctively, or like you see a lot of people, they say one thing but do another thing. That's an example of that. People don't always, they like a lot of like normies seem two-faced in that regard, but we just have to accept that that's how they are, and to help accelerate the way things are headed, to let the diversity bus drive off the cliff, if you will, is for us to like promote rural living and prepping and wholesome lifestyles in the countryside where white people excel and non-whites don't as much. I think it's going to be like these urban people, these urban being shorthand for diversity as well. Urban teens, they're not. If things kind of collapse, inevitably there's going to be a collapse. But if it happens sooner than later, it's going to be even harder for them to adjust. And these people probably don't even. A lot of them would struggle to make a campfire. So it would be like. I think it would be a lot easier for us to survive and thrive, and these cities to just basically what I'm talking about is our strength is being able to live in a certain environment, in our natural habitat, in a certain way of life that other groups struggle with, and that struggle is what creates a physical boundary without it explicitly being stated. That because again, most white people are going to shun explicit ethnocentrism.
See, that's the rub right there. That's the hook for me, because I'm all about us being honest about our racial demographic situation. I
think we should be, to reach the rational people, but the other people, the people that aren't going to be able to process that, or they don't have the thinking skills, or they don't want to because they don't want to be racist, whatever that fake word alert. If they're normies, if this whole country were to turn into Wyoming, it would be an ethno state. That's what I'm saying.
That's a beautiful vision. So let me put a perspective on this, or an angle on this. I was a teacher for many years, so I think as a teacher, and okay, one thing you don't do is you wouldn't have one classroom with let's say fifth graders, sixth graders, seventh graders, eighth graders, and ninth graders in one class. You would not teach each one of them has their own grade, and then because they're all at different developmental stages, right, in their mind, in their life, etc. So you teach to that stage according. This is just the kind of the science of teaching and all that. So, but what we as a movement are dealing with is a classroom filled with, middle of the road people, normies, MAGAs, Christian nationalists, pagans, sort of right, far right, super far right, with this massive spectrum on the right wing, including some of, say, the middle, and even possibly some rational people that consider themselves on the liberals, like classical liberals. And how do we teach to them all? We can't. We have to have a kind of a strategy or a plan for every segment of that spectrum. So there's our problem, I believe, so far is that we've always tried to have one answer. And that one answer only worked for our people that can get who we are, what the white identity movement is. They come to it because they're smart enough, they get it, right? They're mature enough, they get it. But then you've got a lot of people that kind of grew up in that kind of hippie, liberal media world that, you know, had no choice. They grew up in it. It was the world around them. And, you know, they knew something was wrong. They have a moral core. They have something conservative about them. Maybe there's Christian values in their family, who knows what. But, you know, they're kind of like, well, I'm not far right. I mean, I'm not into Nazis and fascists. And right there, immediately when they say that, they don't know what Nazis and fascists are. They're still stuck in the leftist dialectic because they don't read history.
I don't think we can hope for them to really break out of that anytime soon.
Well, that proves my point, is that we have to have a specific conversation / dialectic with people in
but
that.
they'll understand the concept of people being Ameriphobia.
Sure.
There you go.
Sure. And so we have to make like white sovereignty. We have to come up with the dialectic for white sovereignty that fits that grade level. If I'm going to use the school analogy, okay, so we can say, look, you're in a high trust society. Maybe you have to break it down to ethnicity. Like, okay, you're British, you're French, you're German, you're Hungarian, you're Polish, you're Russian, whatever it is, and then say like, okay, concentrate on, say, focusing on preserving your ethnic heritage, for example. That might be more appealing to people at that grade level. You get my point? So
I think maybe to certain, I think even that's, you know, in the American context, certainly that's going to be tough. But I think even in Europe, that's, you know, especially with Northwestern Europeans, they don't like explicit ethnocentrism that is more common throughout the rest of the world among other races. But, you know, again, the way around that is, you know, by other means, other terms.
So that's doing.
They like euphemisms. Give them euphemisms.
Okay, there you go. So that then you wouldn't say something that's explicitly like pro whatever their culture is. Rather, you would say you kind of shine the light on another aspect of the problem. Like as your country's getting overwhelmed by these migrants, you no longer have a country. And therefore, everything you've ever known is going to die away. And you have to somehow plug into something. Like my liberal friend in California, he was trying to explain to me that like these are just natural, organic demographic changes, and you should give up. And by the way, putting white in front of anything makes it racist. And I'm like, fuck you, asshole.
Well, that guy. I mean, his worldview is so antithetical. He's your enemy at that point. That person is not. You can't win them over with euphemisms. They're just against you.
Yeah, it's very. I don't know what the word is for this, but I mean, it is an enormous conflict inside me about like, you know, you're my brother from a long time ago and a friend and da da da. But your worldview is so radically against me and yourself.
Maybe enemy is the wrong word. Just severely brainwashed and
yeah. So that's kind of the crux of the whole discussion here. Is like some people are gone. Like I said, drank the Kool-Aid. He's on the deathbed, if not already like spiritually suicided. You know. But the others, you know, we're going to reach out to them. So anyway, I'm just presenting this notion that let's try to have dialectic that fits these different grade levels, you know. And when I say grade level, I'm not trying to be insulting. Like there's high IQ, middle IQ, and low IQ people, but they're still whites. They're still our people. We still have to save them. And I think that my critique actually of the alt-right or the white identity movement is that we've been too snobbish about that. We're too elitist about it. And I get the argument for elitism. I think that there's you know, it's a discussion, I'll put it that way. But at the same time, if it's working against our goals, then throw it out the window. throw it out the window. Not all of us are going to be well read on Nietzsche or can write a concerto or something or other.
What's insane to me is that these elitist types are always talking about collectivism, yet their elitism is individualism.
Fascinating.
And they want a leader or a small number of elites to aristocracy, but that's just being ruled by individuals. An individual having more authority over the collective, and I mean, it's just it really isn't even. I don't even think it's worth talking about anymore. I think people just need to focus on strategy now and make it fun.
Yeah. Well, that is actually a really, really good place to put a bookmark in it and just say, let's do that, guys. That's what the whole show is about, dialectic, strategy, understanding how language works. I really strongly hope people in the arts will integrate dialectic or create dialectic. I mean, we're the creative ones, right? Maybe the responsibility falls on us more. But to use that in our arts, and then, yes, it's for our people, but define our people. I mean, these whites in the right wing that are not racially woken, they're still our people. They just, they're still sleeping, and we have to help them. And once we get our message in front of them and we're able to grow, and we'll have more power. So dialectic equals power. Is there any closing thoughts?
I guess I could go on. I liked your classroom analogy, and it kind of ties in with my analogy of whites leaving the cities. Because what I was thinking of, what I thought you were originally going to say, was that if we only want ninth graders to excel, we could put all of the different classes, the different grades in one class rather, and teach at a ninth grade level. And of course, only the ninth graders would be able to, pass their exams because, and that's kind of what I'm thinking with, kind of America becoming a more, or rather white people living rural lifestyles and abandoning the cities to these people, and there's a whole argument with the elites being able to import infinite Indian people and Chinese people to these cities. But they would have to do it really quickly and even then, with whites out of the picture, all of the urban youths would, get the Chinese and the Indians to leave, and then the cities would, collapse. That's what I think would happen.
I think that's highly reasonable. I think we should keep our eye on that. Again, if I only had $1 million, I could take these ideas and manifest them. So let's work on our manifestation skills, I guess.
Yeah. In other words, what I'm saying is, if you're a camel, you want the environment to be a desert, and that's that's how we have to think in terms of how we live. And as far as like dialectic, write more. Think about arguments and your wording or your art if you're an illustrator or whatever, and make it fun. Make it fun. Focus on fun.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Beautiful. Well, I'm super appreciative of your taking your time. I know you're exhausted. You had a big day today. We'll connect again, and wishing everybody well in the chat. Wishing well everybody who is watching this. Please subscribe, share, comment, get involved in the movement. Our future depends on it. God bless.